George, let's get started. Is it possible to pin down the exact point in time when you became consciously aware that you could make people laugh?
Well, it would be over a period of my childhood. Pinpoint would be hard to do. But I would say my mother, when I was young, when I was still before the age of 6, my mother worked in an office, and she taught me this thing called the Big Apple, which was a dance craze of the late 30s. And you put your finger up in the air and you kind of dance a little. And she taught me to do that. And when I would go to her office to visit her, when she would bring me there, and the other girls would be sitting around, she would coax me and have me do the Big Apple. And I think that even at that early age, and I was probably 3 or 4 then, I noticed that this process of doing something for people pleased them, and you gained some feeling of approval from it. Now that grew into doing little imitations that I could do that my mother taught me, again, of people I never saw. She taught me to say, "Come up and see me sometime," like Mae West, but I had never seen Mae West, nor did I know anything about her. I imitated what my mother showed me. Then I learned a little later to imitate Johnny the Philip Morris midget, singing, "Call for Philip Morris." And these were just about my A material of the time. That was my first show. And then I, on my own, as I grew up through the rest of my 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, learned that I could do things that gained approval, attention, applause, approbation. All these A's that I never got in school, I got by acting out for people.
How long after that do you figure you decided or made a conscious decision that you wanted to do it for a living?
Well, I can pinpoint one thing, which means it came before this date. This was in 5th grade, when we had to, now 5th grade I was 11 years old. We had to write an autobiography. Naturally, 5th grade I think is a good time to look back over one's life and sum up. So we wrote these little autobiographies. And the last page, we were supposed to tell what we thought our futures would be like, or what we wanted them to be like. And I said on mine that I wanted to be either an actor, impersonator, announcer, comedian, or trumpet player. And it was clear from that to me that I wanted attention, that I wanted to stand in front of people and do something that gained their approval.
You say it was clear to you. You feel that you understood even at that time,
Yes.
or you?
No, I understood at that time, or I wouldn't have used all 5 things like that. I would have thrown in boxer
You
or
became
policeman.
consciously aware. You say, "Hey, I think I need attention."
Yes, I think I like this process. I don't know how much of... I know needing attention was part of it because my father was not present in the home. My mother was not there because she worked all day. Children don't interpret that as in reasonable terms. They say, "Hey, nobody's here. What's going on? What's wrong with me?" So I learned that I could gain people's attention and approval. It's necessary that you take that step, the next step, because you can get people's attention by throwing yourself through a window too. But I found that I had to say, "Oh, isn't he cute? Isn't he clever?" Clever was the word my aunt always used. "He's so clever." Well, I found out later clever is what they call criminals and things. But clever has that. And or the lady who used to take care of me when I was real young called me cunning. He's cunning. And again, that's a word with a negative aspect to it. But they used it positively, and I was aware at that age. See, I was 11 then. I know that at 10 years of age, I saw Danny Kaye in movies and wanted to be like Danny Kaye. I said, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to be in the movies. I'm going to be making people laugh. I'm going to be using my voice the way he does.
Beside the example of Danny Kaye, were there any other events in your early life that you feel helped to shape your approach to comedy?
Well, no, I don't think so. I think at that time it was still a question of comedy becoming paramount to me. The radio comedians. I grew up at the tail end of the golden age of radio and before the beginning of the golden age of television, right on the cusp. And for me, the radio comedians I listened to them, every one of them who had a show, when they didn't compete with one another, I listened to them. I liked comedy. I liked what it did to me.
Any of those specific people that impressed you, or that you thought, any specific names?
Yes. First of all, Fibber McGee and Molly, Amos and Andy, Charlie McCarthy, Edgar Berg and Charlie McCarthy, Fred Allen. I didn't listen much to Jack Benny. I think he must have been on opposite something I liked better. The Bob Hope Show, which was variety but a lot of comedy in it. Bing Crosby had a show, which again had a lot of comedy in it. And then there were these light comic, not soap operas, but these series like Henry Aldrich, Date with Judy, Corliss
the radio
Archer.
sitcoms.
Yeah, the radio sitcoms is exactly what they were. If you'll put these on pause for a minute, I have a piece of research of my own. There were other things at that time, besides the radio comedians, that helped me, that now let me know that's where I was headed. There was a magazine called Thousand Jokes. I never missed an issue of that. There was a satiric magazine that only lasted a short time, Ballyhoo, which I used to get. I got Mad Comics when they were comics, Panic Comics when they were still comics. Panic then became a magazine. There was another magazine called Help. Harvey Kurtzman and these guys drifted around. And
So your interest in comedy was more than whetted. It was, you began to have a serious desire, a serious need, a serious,
Yes.
to go after these things.
Right.
That were comic.
Yes. Esau's Comic Dictionary, another one.
One of the greats.
So, wow, boy, look at it. A sax is a wind that nobody blows good. An ill wind that no one blows good. All that kind of stuff. I mean, it was just as if I couldn't get my hands on enough raw material. I just wanted to...
So we're talking about the formative years,
Yes.
man. We're talking 8, 9, 10, 11, 12
That's
years
right.
old.
That's right.
When you teamed up with Jack Byrnes,
Yes.
You once again did radio.
Yeah, I was still in radio at the time, and my plan to leave radio and become a comedian was not anywhere near fruition yet. I hadn't done it yet. I hadn't gone out and tried it.
Well, when you got together with Jack,
That
you
made it happen.
Right, you did you still did a radio show together.
Yes, we
it was
did.
A comedy radio show.
Right.
And then you went out and started doing some dates.
Right.
Right.
I'm going to unplug that. Jack and I were working in Fort Worth. He had come down from Boston, where we had met one another, and I had left and gone to Fort Worth. He came down from there, driving out to Hollywood, stopped in, got a job that just had opened up the day before at our station. We roomed together for about 3 or 4 months. And after the shows at night, I got off at midnight. He was the nighttime newsman. We would go down to an after-hours coffee house in Fort Worth called The Cellar. This was the tail end of the beatnik era, and these people still thought they were all beatniks. And there were some true beats there. And we would improvise a 2-man act. We'd work up little ideas in our room during the day, and at night we'd go down there and improvise an act based on these ideas. And it was kind of raunchy. It was pretty raunchy. But based on our success with those people, we didn't get paid. They gave us free liquor. It was a coffee house, but they put liquor in coffee cups. This was the place where Kennedy's Secret Service people spent the night before his assassination, where the infamous drinking party took place that the Secret Service agents were at, the Cellar in Fort Worth. Based on this limited success with this captive audience who knew us and were half drunk, we quit radio and drove to California on spec.
Well, you came to California. How much of an act did you have? 5 minutes, 10 minutes?
We probably had 15 minutes.
Of material that you had worked on and polished and at least was getting laughs
yes,
for you.
Polish is a very loose word at this stage,
yeah.
but yes.
But you felt
Yes,
secure enough
we felt secure enough to quit radio. And the guy said, he says, you'll be back. He said, other people have quit this station and thought they were going to Hollywood. You guys will be back. He didn't talk like that. He was
All right, so
protective.
you arrive in Hollywood,
Right.
and now the two of you are out and you're picking up gigs, whatever.
Yeah, after lying on our ass for about a month, our money was stolen. We had to get back into radio here, which we did for 3 months. And at the same time got a job at a place called Cosmo Alley, a coffee house, and started working there. Lenny Bruce came in to see us. Mort Saul came in to see us, thanks to our manager, Murray Becker. And Lenny got us a GAC contract, and Mort spoke up for us at a couple of places, and we were launched, so to speak. We also made an album after being in the business only for 3 weeks. We made an album. Got
Were,
paid
were you
300.
able to create, come up with enough material at that point?
We kept adding things. Yeah, we were fairly fertile. You know, the stuff. Later on, it wasn't that way. I wanted to be a single. I wanted to get away, and
Well, right around this period, George,
Yeah.
when you made the transition from being on radio to doing an act in front of an audience,
Yeah.
what were some of the new techniques that you had to learn being face to face with an audience that you couldn't possibly have known or done being face to face with a radio microphone?
Well, it was more like what I was used to in my neighborhood. I was quite a street corner clown in my neighborhood prior to. This is what let me know prior to my radio experience and why I had that plan at 15 to be a comedian, because I could make up things about the people in our neighborhood. I used to have like about a 30 or 40-minute act in my neighborhood that I would do on the stoop, not all at once. They'd say, "Hey, Georgie, tell me the story about Artie Lips coming out of the bar and then Margaret's outside." And I would just improvise this stuff about characters in my neighborhood. I had about 10 or 12 people whom I imitated, and I knew all of their salient points of their characters and so forth, and I would make up things. I made up a whole story about all the priests going to Coney Island on a drinking party. And so I was used to having people in front of me, even in small groups on the neighborhood, and getting laughs and being on the tightrope, having to survive from laugh to laugh.
Well, what about the technical things, simple like handling a microphone, being up and under the lights?
I don't remember a lot about that, Larry. There were two of us, and we had that safety of two guys up there, so that you didn't ever have the feeling that, oh, the world is on my shoulders. It was a shared thing. Working a microphone, working a room where it's not all your friends sitting around is another thing. The first 4 weeks we spent was in a coffee house here in Hollywood, which was fairly, they were fairly nice to you. Later on came the saloons and the nightclubs where some of them were drunk or some of them were indifferent. They didn't even come to see the headliner.
How long after you had worked with Jack did you make the decision that you wanted to go it alone?
Well, about a year after we got together, about a year after we began the nightclub work, I married Brenda. I met her within that year and was engaged to her during that year, and then we got married. And I had begun by then to think more seriously about my own future and my trip, whatever it was going to be. And I knew I was going to be a single. And I'd say halfway. Jack and I stayed together 2 years. I'd say about halfway during that time, I began to think about it more seriously. And I was pretty open with Jack about it the whole time. In fact, before that second year was up, I was in Dayton, where Brenda was from, where I met her. Jack and I were off. He was in Boston. I was hanging around with Brenda in Dayton. Peter, Paul, and Mary were scheduled to come into the club where she worked, the Racket Club, where I met her. And Peter had some illness, and they couldn't make it, and they had 2 nights open. And I was pressed into service. And this was very unexpected. Now, so I took material of Jack's and mine that I was able to do single-o, and I took some other things I had been preparing for myself and managed to get through 2 nights of it. So that's a sign that I was ready.
Right. This material at this particular stage of your career, is this what one would frame common denominator comedy? Was it something that appealed to the masses?
No, Jack and I, and the stuff I did coming out of Jack and my time together, was for its time very topical and had an edge, had a political commentary involved in it. We took stands, we took positions, we did jokes about racism, about the Ku Klux Klan, about the John Birch Society, about religions and fringe religions, about charities and how they are not all on the up and up. We had a routine called Captain Jack and Jolly George, which is about giving kids heroin kits.
Well, we're not talking Henny Youngman jokes now. We're talking some sophisticated material.
Yeah, we felt connected to that sort of that movement that was starting then, that Lenny Bruce and Mort Saul had certainly been the best exponents of. And that other young people were trying to do coffee house comedy more than nightclub comedy.
Okay, so you get out on your own and you start doing your own material and so forth. Now, certainly, well, I shouldn't decide that. was the material you began to do as a single and begun and done well enough, obviously, to get you into Vegas now?
Yeah.
Was that the same kind of material?
No, there began to be a change. I came out of coffee houses. Even though Jack and I worked a lot of, quote, nightclubs, we were more or less coffee house oriented act. And
The coffee house audience were made up of...
well, they had a more intellectual bent. They weren't all intellectuals, obviously, but there were people who liked jazz and folk music. They were generally left-wing politically and appreciated risk-taking in an act of any kind.
Okay, and a lot of college people?
College, yes.
Okay.
And college and the college-informed kind of intellect,
Fine.
post-college.
Okay, go on. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Okay. So we came out of that, and we did a lot of nightclubs too. See, we worked the Playboy circuit, which is certainly the total antithesis of coffee houses. Now, so when Jack and I broke up, I took over these, because he didn't want to do a single, I took over these Playboy dates. And I took over and did certain nightclub situations that Jack and I had where I was able to go back as a single. And I didn't do much coffee house stuff. And then I hit a kind of a dip. Now, this is 63 and 64. And I felt I had to take a stand somewhere. And I felt I had to find a spot in New York, which I did, the Cafe Au Go-Go on Bleecker Street. And I stayed there for like 2 years, even though I traveled some, and I went to other little places. On and off, I spent about 2 years in that place, a week at a time, a month at a time, 2 days at a time, off for 7 days, on for 12 days, off for 3 months, back for 2 months, all this stuff, just trying to work, use it as a laboratory. And to get my little piece together for Merv or Mike Douglas. Those were the entree shows. You didn't jump right to the Tonight Show. That wasn't as simple. You had to have some a little bit of background, even though you were unknown, to get on there. But as far as Merv was concerned, he would take brand new people, and Mike Douglas was sort of like the same situation in Philadelphia. I hung around the Cafe Au Go-Go through 1965. I got my Merv interview in May '65. And in July '65, I was on his show. So 63 and 4 and 5, I did a lot of club dates. I did a lot of, $50 for Brown's Hotel in the Catskills, the Music Teachers of Suffolk County, all this kind of one-nighter, what we, as you know, call club dates. I also did an occasional week at a nightclub out of town where I could afford to go and then where I wouldn't spend as much to get there as I would make. But I stayed around New York, and I stayed in that atmosphere, and I worked on my act. And I was aiming toward television. So the material, answering this question now, the material's orientation toward confrontation and politics, which I had a little earlier, began to soften and become diluted because I was looking for the mass audience through television.
In order to appear on television,
right.
you had to
in order to further my career, because acting was at the back end of this whole load when I was 15.